remember speaking to a prospect and he was talking about an experience he'd had regarding some advertising. I had the same experience and I had to physically put my hand over my mouth to let him explain. Welcome back. I'm Joanna Slater. Today I'm going to share 5 simple tips that help me become a better listener on my phone calls. Now I have to admit, when I first started in sales, I thought my job was to talk, to fill every silence with facts and features and all the clever things I thought prospects wanted to hear. But midway in conversations, people just switched off. I learned the hard way that my prospect will actually tell me exactly how to sell to them if I'd stop talking long enough to listen. So let's jump right in. Stop interrupting. I love this one and I'm so guilty of it. How many times, I'm sure you can relate to this, being in a conversation with a friend and halfway through their conversation you interrupt because you've had a similar experience and bursting to let them know. Well, in telephone sales, when speaking to your prospect, you must learn to keep quiet until the time is right. You're going to find it hard, but the rewards are far greater. By truly listening and giving your prospects the space to express themselves, you unlock insights into their needs and emotions. Interrupting hinders your understanding and stops their flow of thought. I remember speaking to a prospect and he was talking about an experience he'd had regarding some advertising. I had the same experience and I had to physically put my hand over my mouth to let him explain. You'll be surprised on what your prospect will say just by keeping quiet. Taking time to listen before responding allows you to formulate more thoughtful and well-considered responses. Listen for emotional clues. People don't always tell you everything directly in their words. Sometimes it's their tone or their emotion behind what they're saying that tells you exactly what's going on. For example, a prospect might say, "Things are fine," but their voice sounds flat, tired or frustrated. And that's your clue that things probably aren't as fine as they're making out. I used to focus so much on the words that I completely missed the emotion behind them. But once I started paying attention to their emotions, I had a better understanding about their situation. So now I listen carefully for things like changes in their tone, frustration, hesitation, excitement, stress or uncertainty. When I hear those emotional clues, I acknowledge them. I might say, "I see," or "I understand," or even, "That must be confusing." Small responses like that show the prospect you're generally listening and understanding how they feel. And what usually happens? They begin opening up even more. When people feel emotionally understood, they naturally become more comfortable talking to you. One prospect I spoke to sounded incredibly stressed while explaining delays in their business. I thought about it, and instead of rushing into my presentation, I simply said, "That sounds like a lot of pressure for you and your team right now." Suddenly the conversation stopped feeling like a sales call and started feeling like a genuine discussion. By responding with empathy, you're showing the prospect that you acknowledge and understand their emotions. That's one of the most powerful listening skills you can develop on a sales call. Repeat back key information. Another one of my biggest improvements I made on my sales calls was learning to repeat back key information to my prospect. Obviously, I don't mean I was repeating every single thing. What I mean is briefly summarising the important points they'd actually shared with me. This actually showed them that I was generally listening and I understood their perspective. It also acts as a quick review of the key information so both of you stay clear on what's important in the conversation. Another prospect once who explained they were struggling with production delays, staff pressures and missed deadlines. So instead of jumping straight into my solution, I paused and said, "So if I understand correctly, the main issue right now is the pressure the delays are putting on your team and keeping production running smoothly. Is that right?" Sometimes prospects will add more information after you repeat things back. They might even say, "Yes, exactly. And it's also affecting our customer turnaround times." That gives you an even clearer picture of what really matters to them. I've learnt that people open up more when they feel someone is really paying attention. And honestly, in today's world, where so many people interrupt or rush conversations, simply listening properly already makes you stand out from the rest. Ask better questions, then pause. Another one of my biggest mistakes I made early on was asking a question, but being impulsive and not giving time for my prospect to think about it. So I jumped in because I couldn't handle the silence. I remember one call where I asked a client about their biggest challenge. They didn't answer straight away, and honestly, every part of me wanted to jump in and rescue the conversation. But instead, I waited. I gave them time to think, and eventually they opened up and explained the problems within their business. And I never would have discovered that if I'd interrupted. Some of the most valuable information on a sales call comes after the silence. Now, instead of rushing to fill every pause, I ask better questions and give people space to answer properly. Questions like, "What's been your biggest challenge recently? What would you ideally like to improve? Or how is that affecting your business at the moment?" And then I wait. Sometimes they simply need a few seconds to gather their thoughts, and when you give them that space, they'll often tell you far more than you expected. Silence can feel uncomfortable at first, especially in telephone sales, but I've learnt that if you can become comfortable with pauses, your conversations become far more productive. I've always remembered this saying: silence is golden. Confirm and use their words. Another listening skill that completely changed my conversations was learning to use the prospect's own words during a call. Because honestly, it's far too easy to rely on memory and miss the small details that really matter. So now I always take notes while the prospect is speaking. And I don't just write down general information, I pay attention to the exact words and phrases they use. So for example, a prospect might say, "Everything feels rushed and stressful at the moment." These words are important because they reveal how the prospect generally feels about the situation. Then a little bit later on in the conversation, I'll naturally refer back to those same words. I might say, "So ideally, you'd like a process that feels less rushed and takes some pressure off of your team." It shows I've been generally listening to everything they've said. Sometimes simply using the prospect's own language can make them feel like, finally, someone gets what I'm dealing with. So let's recap on the 5 tips for becoming a better listener on your sales calls. Stop interrupting. Hands over your mouth and keep quiet. Listen for emotional cues. Understand how they are really feeling. Repeat back key information. Let them know you've understood. Ask better questions than pause. Give them time to speak. Confirm and use their words. Take notes and use their words. Now here's my question for you. Which one of these tips would you try on your next call? Please drop it in the comments below. So thank you very, very much for watching, and Please don't miss next week's video, which will be on conversation skills. So I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye-bye for now.